Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to MABA. My name is Sherrie McMillan, and here at MABA they named me Xianxing. My talk today is going to be on mindfulness and meditation. It's a lot warmer in here than outside, so settle in for a talk, and I hope I can explain and clarify some things about mindfulness and meditation, because there are many teachings in the world today about mindfulness and meditation, and they often seem to be in conflict with each other, which does not make sense when you look at them. So I hope I can clarify what they are, and also explain why we do them in Buddhism. What's the purpose? Because there are lots of reasons why you can do meditation and mindfulness. And in Buddhism, we do them for some specific reasons. And meditation has many uses in the world. Some people use it in order to become better at focusing. Some people do it for relaxation, for easing stress. There are people who use it in therapy, like psychologists and therapists. There are scientists who are using it to study how the brain functions. There are people who use it as a form of prayer. There are people who use it to clear their mind before they have to do something big, like give a public talk. Most spiritual traditions have some kind of meditation practice. Hindus and Jains obviously have well-developed meditation systems. Every religion has some branch or sect that is known for contemplation. For instance, the Catholics have the Carthusian monks in the Carmelite monasteries. In Protestant religions, the Quakers and the Shakers were doing this kind of thing. In Islam, there are the Sufis. The meditation practices of Buddhism had their start in ancient India, as you all probably know. In Buddhism, there's one word that encompasses all the different kinds of meditation and mental trainings that we can do. It's called dhyana. And this again includes many things. Every Buddhist tradition has various practices for this. There are practices that the Buddha himself taught. There are practices that have been developed in modern times. And these are just some of the different names for meditation and mindfulness practices that you may have run across. Anapanasati and Satipatthana, which are practices which the Buddha taught himself. Shamatha, Vipassana, Shikantaza, breath meditation, Samadhi, concentration, jhanas, chan, dzogchen, mahamudra, generation and completion from the Tibetan practices, and zazen from Japan. Jhana includes all these, and there are many more than I could fit on one slide. You may also have heard of metta practice, chod, tantric visualizations, tonglen. These are all part of the dhyana trainings of Buddhism. Now, Buddhism has many teachings and practices, and they can be categorized into these three categories. Shila is training in discipline, ethics, and morality. Dhyana includes the meditation or concentration trainings, working with our mind, and prajna is wisdom. Some trainings fit into more than one of them. So these three categories work together. With better discipline, for instance, you'll meditate better and more often. With better concentration from your meditation practice, you'll be able to listen better to teachings. And when you can listen better to the teachings, you'll develop wisdom more easily. because you're paying attention and really hearing the teachings. With more wisdom, your personal ethics and your behavior will be better. You'll be able to figure out the right thing to do. Sometimes that's very difficult to figure out. So the three work together. And why do we have these three? Sheila helps us learn how to behave and how to treat others. Gianna teaches us how to stay clear-minded, be able to see how things really are. And Prajna is the wisdom to make the right interpretations and decisions. So in Buddhism, these practices and trainings and mindfulness and meditation work together with these other two. Sometimes in America, you can go to a mindfulness class or a meditation class, and they won't mention ethics, for instance, or wisdom. But in Buddhism, these three things work together, and they're all part of the path. You can't really do one without the other. They need to all be present. So this is something that separates secular practices of mindfulness from Buddhist mindfulness and meditation. In Buddhism, the three work together, like the three legs of a stool. If you take away one of the legs, the stool falls over. If we practice a lot of discipline, but we don't have a lot of wisdom, we may become too harsh. We may follow the rules so tightly that we hurt other people. We don't have compassion for others, for instance. If all we do is meditation and we don't use it to develop our minds and our wisdom, and we don't develop our ethics, then we're just kind of wasting our lives sitting there feeling good. So we need to develop all three of these in Buddhism. So our meditation trainings or dhyana trainings do several things. Some of the most important ones are that they calm our mind down. They help us concentrate the mind. They help us develop clarity or clear insight. And these things help us to relinquish our attachments and free us from suffering. This happens because when our mind is calmer and we're able to pay attention to what we're doing, we can do the thing that we intend to do. Have you ever been driving a car and suddenly realized you'd forgotten that you were driving a car and you're where you intended to go and you don't remember getting there because you weren't paying attention sometimes? That's mindlessness. So we want to be able to pay attention to what we're doing. So if you don't, you can end up doing the wrong thing. Or even being mistaken about what's going on. A while back, I was sick. I had the flu or something, and I was home for the day, and I took a nap in the middle of the day. And I woke up to this loud bang, bang, and the house shook. And for some reason, I immediately thought, oh, a tree fell on the house. I may have thought this because it happened when I was a kid, and there was a similar thing. The house shook, and there was a loud bang. And so I sleepily got up and wandered around the house looking and looking, like, where did the tree fall down? And I kept hearing this beep, beep, beep of a car in the distance, and it was a little irritating. But I kept walking around looking for where something had fallen on the house. I was sure something had fallen on the house. I got this story set in my mind, and I ignored this beep, beep, beep from a car that I was hearing. And then I finally woke up a little bit more, and my mind was a little more clear. I thought, oh, nothing fell on the house. There was a car accident outside. So I went and got my phone and went outside, and there had been a car accident outside. And I ran out the door just as the police were coming up. And if I had been more clear-minded, not so sleepy and dull-minded, I would have paid more attention to that constant beeping of that car alarm and that horn that was going off. And I would have been able to go out there sooner and maybe help them a little bit. I wasn't able to do that because my mind was confused. So if we have a calm mind, a concentrated mind, a clear mind, we can respond to whatever comes up appropriately, and we can be there for other people, and we can help them. Now, you may not know what we mean by attachments. Attachments are when we're clinging to ideas and feelings that we have, to objects that we like, to views that we have about the world. And sometimes it's hard to realize that we have these attachments. For instance, we may have a conception about a certain gender, race, religion, and when we see someone who belongs to that group, without even realizing it, there may be thoughts or feelings that arise in our mind. And without realizing it, we let these preconceptions affect the way that we treat those people. Now, if we can calm our mind down and clear our mind, we can see these things when they're arising and we can stop them. If we see someone coming down the street who's dressed a certain way, and we grew up hearing that that kind of person is a bad person, that can be very difficult to stop those habits that have been planted in your mind, whether it's through your own actions in the past or through things that you keep hearing from other people. So if we can clear and calm our mind, we can overcome that, because we can see it arising, we can see that it's there, we can recognize it, and we can say, no, I'm not going to think that way. I'm going to be here right now, see this person as they are here in front of me. So this is a very important reason for practicing these mental trainings in Buddhism. So calming, concentration, and insight. In Buddhism, we can classify these into two main categories. One is shamatha, and one is vipassana. It's also called vipassana. Shamatha is about calming the mind, focusing the attention on a single object, and developing concentration so that the mind is fully absorbed by the object, with no distractions for other things. Vipassana is often called clear insight, and it is seeing and clearly comprehending whatever the mind is aware of. The mind must be able to concentrate on an object in order to fully comprehend it. So these two can actually work together. If you can develop shamatha, your vipassana will be improved, and when you develop vipassana, you can improve your shamatha. When we sit and we focus on one thing, like just our breath, try to just not get distracted by everything else and just pay attention to the breath, this is practicing shamatha, because we're concentrating on one thing. Vipassana is being aware of what is happening, whatever it is, being aware of it, knowing it clearly. So shamatha and vipassana, they can actually both be done in different ways. And different teachers teach different methods of doing these things. For instance, Master G has been teaching, we heard this recently, if some of you were at the retreat, that we do shamatha while we are sitting and do vipassana when we are moving. So when we are sitting, we are trying to concentrate and focus. And then, for instance, when we are doing the walking meditation, we are paying attention to our contact of our feet on the ground, and we are paying attention to what is going on. Right? If you're walking and you concentrate only on just one thing, like just your breath, you would forget that you were walking, for instance. So with Vipassana, we have to be mindful of what's going on and what's happening. So mindfulness training can lead us to Vipassana or clear insight. Now I'm going to be reading some quotes from various teachers in Buddhism. So one of the things I'd like to show is that these practices are done in various branches of Buddhism. They don't belong to just one school. You may have heard things like Vipassana is only done, I'll just mention some things I read over the years. Vipassana is only a Theravadan practice. I remember reading once, that's not true. I read that Tibetans don't meditate. That's not true. So I'm going to read a little bit from different schools during my talk so that we can hear from different schools on these same topics. Why do we train our minds? Master Xingyun, who is a modern Chan teacher, said in Only a Great Rain that our minds seem to belong to us, and yet as soon as we sit down with the idea that we would like to take a closer look at their workings, we find that they do not obey us at all. I think we've all seen that. If you sat down just now and tried to pay attention to your breath, it can be really difficult. Or even looking at your whole body. If I think Don took you through a body meditation, it can be difficult to keep your mind focused on specific things. It wants to go off on something else. It doesn't want to stay on one thing. Why is that? It's because we have an untrained mind. The untrained mind is not controlled by us. It's controlled by what are called the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. We think we're in control of our mind, but unfortunately, in ignorance, as soon as we see something attractive, we run after it regardless of the consequences. Some of us have probably chased an attractive person that we liked, or done silly things to try to get their attention. And maybe when we got them, we found out they weren't as great as we thought they were. They weren't worth all the trouble. If we don't get what we want, or if somebody else gets it, or if it's somehow taken from us, we can get angry. With our mind overrun by these strong emotions, like anger, we can't settle down and think clearly about things. We operate in ignorance, in anger, and in greed, and the whole cycle just keeps rolling along. The untrained mind is often compared to the mind of a monkey in the grip of its momentary emotions. This is not a monkey, this is a gorilla. But I have him up to talk about ignorance. While animals are considered sentient beings in Buddhism, so they have intelligence, they have feelings and emotions, but they lack in what Buddhist teachings refer to as wisdom. People also lack wisdom, but we can develop it or awaken it. Unfortunately, animals can't do that. They just don't have the skills to do that. So if you remember the gorilla a few years ago that was killed in the Ohio Zoo, and the boy fell in, he seemed to know the little boy was hurt. The first thing he did was run over and look at him, and then he kept the other gorillas from coming and bothering him. He was protecting him. So he had these initial good impulses. He was compassionate. But then the people around who were looking in were screaming, yelling. They were all terrified the gorilla was going to do something, that the boy was hurt. And they were just wild with their emotions. They were screaming, they were yelling. And if you look at the film taken at the time, you can see the gorilla getting confused and upset. He doesn't know what's going on. All these people seem to be angry at him, and he doesn't know what's going on. And so he starts doing threat displays. He's like telling people, he's in charge. That didn't make things better. They started yelling and screaming more, which made him more upset. And of course, the zookeepers came in and they shot him so that they could pull the little boy out. They said there wasn't anything else they could do because the situation had become escalated to such a violent point that they thought that was the only thing they could do to get him out. Now, most of us might not know what to do if a boy fell, 20 feet onto concrete either. But if we can maintain a clear head, we might be able to help and keep things from getting worse. It takes some wisdom to do that, and a calm mind, and a mind that comprehends what's going on. Now this chimpanzee, he has probably taken more than he can eat, and he has run off away from the other chimpanzees. He's holding his food. He wants it so much that he's holding yams in his toes, in his fingers, in his mouth. He's taken more than he can want, than he can possibly use. Overcome by our own desires, we can do things with no thought for others or of the consequences of our actions. He's done this. Now the other chimpanzees might want the food too, and they might get into a fight. Anger. This orangutan's obviously very angry, and he probably has a pretty good reason to be angry. He's probably being threatened. People are cutting down the rainforest where they live, and they're losing their homes. Unfortunately, getting angry doesn't generally make things better. When we're blinded by our anger, we strike out with the intent to harm, regardless of consequences. We don't stop to find out or to think if our response is really the right one to take. So how can we calm our mind down and develop the clarity of mind that can lead to wisdom? That's why we do these mental trainings. Now I'm going to have to skip some of these because I will run out of time. But to come back to calming and insight again, I'm going to quote from Master Ji Yi, who was a Chinese master. He founded the Tiantai school in 6th century China. And back then he said, calming, or shamatha, constitutes the initial method through which one is able to suppress the fetters. Insight, or vipassana, is the primary essential through which one is able to cut off the delusions. Calming, then, is the wholesome provision with which one kindly nurtures the mind and consciousness. Insight, then, is the marvelous technique which stimulates the development of spiritual understanding. Calming is the supreme cause for the manifestation of jhana absorption. Insight is the origin of wisdom. So, as I mentioned before, you can do this in various ways. You can do, some teachers teach that you should do shamatha first, and that you practice shamatha for a long time, and eventually it concentrates the mind, and then vipassana develops. When your mind is concentrated fully and you use it appropriately, you'll have insight. Some other teachers have you do vipassana first, and you do vipassana mindfulness practices for a long time, and eventually the mind becomes calm and concentrated also. Some traditions have you do both at the same time, like Dzogchen in Tibet. And I mentioned Master Ji is teaching us to do them both, which is interesting, as that's how I learned them without having a teacher. When I started, I learned Mindfulness from a cookbook. I won't go into the details. I think I've talked about it before. And then I thought I should meditate too, so I read a little bit about shamatha and started doing it. And I think this is a really good path to do both, because they both help each other to grow. And as you improve in one, you're going to improve in the other. So they support each other. And here I have some words from ancient India and Tibet. Venerable Kamala Shila was trained at Nalanda University in India, and he was one of the people who helped establish Buddhism in Tibet. And in his book, Stages of Meditation, which was the first Dharma text written in the Tibetan language, he said, since all kinds of concentration can be included in these two, by concentration they mean all the dhyana practices, all yogis must at all times seek calm abiding meditation and special insight. Again, the Unraveling of the Thought Sutra says, the Buddha has said it must be known that the teaching of various types of concentration sought by his hearers, bodhisattvas, and tathagatas are all contained in calm abiding meditation and special insight. Now, I would just mention this very briefly because these are talks all on their own, and we have these talks on the website and you can look them up. Multiple talks on these topics. The Buddha specifically taught suttas about Mahasatipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness, and the Anapanasati Sutta, which is mindfulness of the breath. So I'm going to skip through these because you can learn about those later. But in all these trainings, and in Buddhist practices in general, there are three things we need to develop. We need these both for meditation and for discipline and ethics, and we also need them to put wisdom into practice. So we need to develop sati, or mindfulness. This is remembering what we are doing, so that when we are doing walking meditation, we keep paying attention to walking. We don't let our attention be distracted by the birds flying by the window, or how someone else in the room is walking, or what someone is wearing, or what we're going to have for lunch, or what time it is. We are mindful of what we are doing and what's going on. Sampajana is translated many different ways, but we can think of it as watchful examination or clear comprehension. Appamada is carefulness or conscientiousness. Now these three things are translated many different ways into English. For instance, Sampajana and Appamada have both been translated as vigilance. So it can get pretty confusing. Just remember, Sampajana is vigilance and care in knowing or seeing what is going on in your mind, your body, your actions. And Appamada is vigilance and care, always making sure that you're doing something that is beneficial and wholesome, not harmful. So these three things are necessary. They're helpful in regular life, right? So that you don't knock things over when you're walking around. So that when you study, you can study carefully and actually learn what you're trying to learn. So that when you're driving, you're not banging into curbs and things. We really need watchfulness when we're parallel parking and things like that, and when we're driving. So traditionally, sati is described as the doorman, guarding the door of the mind. He guards the gates of the senses. Sampajana is the overseer, watches everything that is happening in the body and mind, examining it carefully. Appamada is like a bride, making sure everything is done the right way and nothing is done wrong. So a trained mind will have these three faculties. I have another quote. This one is from the Dalai Lama. And he's speaking about sati, sampajana, and appamada, but he's using different translations of the words. He said, as we try to ensure that the conduct of our body, speech, and mind does not degenerate and is properly disciplined and controlled, the main instruments we need to employ are mindfulness and introspective vigilance. That's sampajana. And as a basis for these two, we need conscientiousness. For without being conscientious, we will never be able to develop either mindfulness or vigilance. So when we're trying to be mindful of what's going on, for instance, when we're doing a walking meditation, conscientiousness means we make sure that we keep paying attention, we keep being mindful, we keep paying attention to our body as we walk. And sampajana means we know what's going on in our body. We know if we need to speed up, slow down, walk more carefully. And mindfulness is being mindful of all these things at once and always remembering what we are doing. So, these things are found in all major schools. Just so you can see that, I have a chart showing what they are in Pali, in Sanskrit, in Mandarin, and Tibetan. So, sati is mindfulness, sampajana and appamada we just talked about. Samadhi is concentration. I didn't talk about that really, but you'll see samadhi very often if you keep reading about mindfulness and meditation. And then shamatha and vipassana. And you can see they've talked about these in all these different schools. They're in all those languages. So these things, being careful, being mindful, they're good for everybody. Why would we do them in Buddhism? They help us to practice on the path, to attain wisdom, to let go of our attachments, and to find release and peace, hopefully to become awakened. Yet they look so different when we see them in all these different schools. So even in the Buddha's time, people saw that there were all these different things and that they all looked so different and that people had different opinions on them. So I'm going to read a short piece from the Buddha before I finish. It's called the Kimsuka Sutta, or the riddle tree. And that is a picture of a flower of the riddle tree. It's found in India, China, Southeast Asia, and it goes by many different names. It's called the riddle tree because every time you see one, it looks so different that you would not know it's the same tree. So it can be different colors. Unlike most trees, it loses its leaves and then it has flowers. So it's a very unusual tree. One of its other names is the flame tree, or the flame of the forest. So a certain monk went to another monk, and on arrival, the first monk said to the second monk, "To what extent, my friend, is a monk's vision well purified?" This means he sees things clearly, he clearly comprehends things, he knows the way things are. It's not altered by his prejudices and preconceptions. And so the second monk answered, "When a monk discerns as it actually is the origination and passing away of the media of sensory contact, my friend, his vision is said to be well purified. So the first monk was not happy with this answer. He went to another monk. And he said to the third monk, "To what extent, my friend, is a monk's vision said to be well purified?" And the third monk said, "When a monk discerns as it actually is the origination and passing away of the 5 aggregates, my friend, his vision is said to be well purified." The monk was not happy with this answer either, so he went to another monk. And he said to the fourth monk the same question, "To what extent, my friend, is a monk's vision said to be well purified?" The fourth monk said, "When a monk discerns as it actually is the origination and passing away of the 4 great elements, his vision is said to be well purified." The monk was still not happy with this one. Everyone was different. He didn't know what to think. He said, "How will I know my vision is purified? How do I do this?" So he went to another monk and asked him the same question. And the fifth monk said, "When a monk discerns as it actually is that whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation, my friend, it is to that extent that his vision is said to be well purified." The monk was quite unhappy with having so many different answers. He wanted a clear answer that told him exactly what he was looking for. So he went to the Buddha. And he told the Buddha about these conversations he had had. And the Buddha replied, "Monk, it's as if there were a man who had never seen a riddle tree. He would go to another man who had seen one and would say, 'What is a riddle tree like?' The other would say, 'It is black in color, like a burnt stump.' For at the time he saw it, that is what the tree looked like." So the first man, unhappy with this answer, might go to another man who had seen the riddle tree, and on arrival said to him, "What, my good man, is a riddle tree like?" And this next man would say, "A riddle tree is red, like a lump of meat. For at the time he saw it, that's what it looked like." The man, dissatisfied with this answer, would go to another man and ask the same question. The answer would be, "A riddle tree is stripped of its bark, my good man, and has burst pods, like an acacia tree. For at the time he saw it, that's what it was." So the man, dissatisfied with this answer, might go to someone else and ask. And the next answer would be, "A riddle tree has thick foliage, my good man, and gives dense shade like a banyan tree. For at the time he saw it, that's what it was." In the same way, the Buddha said, however, those intelligent men of integrity, these monks, were focused when their vision became well purified, that's the way in which they answered. So everyone will tell you the answer according to how they attained to that state, because everyone was following a different path, a different practice towards this. So to explain this, the Buddha went on to say, suppose, monk, that there were a royal fortress with strong walls and ramparts and 6 gates. In it would be a wise, experienced, intelligent gatekeeper to keep out those he did not know and to let in those he did. A swift pair of messengers coming from the east would say to the gatekeeper, "Where, my good man, is the commander of this fortress?" He would say, "There he is, sitting in the center." The swift pair of messengers would deliver their accurate report to the commander and then go back by the route by which they had come. The swift pair of messengers coming from the west, the north, the south would do the same thing. They would come to the gatekeeper. They would look for the commander of the fortress and bring him an accurate report. The swift pair of messengers delivering their accurate report to the commander would then go back by the route by which they had come. The Buddha said, "I have given you this simile to convey a message." Luckily, the Buddha explained what the message was this time. He did not leave us to figure it out. He said, the message is this: the fortress stands for this body. composed of 4 elements, born of a mother and father, nourished with rice and barley, subject to a rubbing and abrasion, to stresses, to breaking and falling apart. The 6 gates stand for the 6 sense media. This is eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The ways by which we know the world, we have senses. These are the gates into our consciousness. So the commander of the fortress stands for consciousness. The gatekeeper stands for mindfulness. Make sure that everything that's coming in is good and wholesome, and everything going out is good and wholesome. The swift pair of messengers stands for tranquility, or shamatha, and insight, or vipassana. The accurate report stands for nibbana. The route by which they had come stands for the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So in the Buddha's teachings, we use these things ultimately to attain nirvana or to become awakened. So you may see these used for many other things, like being better at work, being a better worker, being a better student, being a better parent. In Buddhism, all these things are good, but ultimately we want to become awakened, because then we can become the best sort of person who is beneficial to all and harmful to none. So, through this practice, may all beings know happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know the great joy that is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the equanimity that is free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance.